were all accepted within the city walls into the community founded by the Greeks, an exemplary demonstration of tolerance. Naples was only one of many Greek cities in Italy. Paestum, 60 miles to the south, was the location of a very important Greek sanctuary. We don't know exactly when Paestum was founded, but it certainly dates back to at least 600 years before the birth of Christ, and was founded by settlers from Sybaris, another city of Magna Graecia. Paestum's importance in antiquity is evidenced by these walls that surrounded the inhabited areas. But the best testimony to its wealth are the great temples of the sanctuary, built in the 7th and 6th centuries BC. At that time, Paestum was known as Poseidonia, the Greek name for the city, in homage to the sea god Poseidon. This temple, improperly called a basilica by the early scholars, is the oldest one. It was dedicated to the goddess Hera, a divinity who was venerated as the goddess of fertility and maternity, and who would watch over women when they were about to give birth. The temple has 50 well-preserved columns that taper towards the top. The capitals and the temple decoration in general are in Doric style. About 100 years after the construction of the basilica, the inhabitants of Paestum built the so-called Temple of Poseidon in the immediate vicinity. Actually, we do not know to whom the temple was dedicated, but it is one of the best preserved of Magna Graecia. It had symmetrical fronts, with 6 columns along each shorter side and 14 columns along each longer one. The complex of the 2 temples comprised the sacred area. At the time, the sight of the 2 stone giants shining in the sunlight must have been a view of rare beauty. Another great temple of the city is the one dedicated to the goddess Athena. This temple is quite original to the expert's eye, since its external columns were Doric, while the columns and capitals around the cella, currently displayed in the Museum of Paestum, were Ionic. For modern scholars, this is the first known case of 2 different architectonic orders used in the same building. During medieval times, the temple was converted into a Christian church, as demonstrated by the tombs found inside. In the Forum lies the so-called Italic Temple, or Capitolium, the first temple built by the Romans after the year 273 BC, when Poseidonia came under their domain and took the name of Paestum. This temple was rather exotic, starting with its high base, a lot different than those of the Greek temples. It was dedicated to the triad of divinities honored on the Capitoline Hill in Rome: Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. At the turn of the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, the temple occupied a part of the stairways of a pre-existing structure, the area of the Comitium, where the city assembly met in the open air. The area was packed with monuments, and in the distance was the great bulk of the amphitheater. Sacred rites in these temples were carried out under strict guidelines. Inside of the temple dedicated to the goddess Hera, for example, we find a large cella with 3 naves and a bi-level colonnade. But in ancient times, it was only the priests and initiates who were allowed to walk down the colonnade and enter religious buildings. Others would have to stop in the pronaos in front of the entrance. Every morning, the priests purified the cella with holy water and made offerings of food and drink to the large statue of the goddess. The door was the only opening in the cella. The wooden ceiling and the imposing statue of the goddess must have filled the hearts of the priests with an indescribably mystical sensation. the temples at Paestum have always fascinated the numerous people who visit them. In the 18th and 19th centuries, famous celebrities such as the archaeologist and art historian Winckelmann and the poets Goethe and Shelley would come to Italy on their grand tour as a kind of pilgrimage in search of beauty. Another fascinating Greek site not far from Naples is a small fishing village known as Potswili. In ancient times it was called Dikyarchia, which in Greek means City of Justice. It was founded in 529 BC by refugees from the island of Samos, including the philosopher Pythagoras, who were fleeing the tyranny of Polycrates. The liberty they won was relatively short-lived. In 190 BC, a Roman colony was instituted on the ruins here that took the name of Puteoli, later becoming Potswili. On the promontory, the ancient acropolis of the city, the Romans built a large temple during the Augustan period. The temple was revealed again recently after a fire destroyed the church of San Proculo in 1963. Potswili was the most important port in the empire for descendants of the Greeks, Rome's true gateway to the sea. There were docks here for large cargo ships that transported goods all over the empire. Today, nothing remains of the ancient piers. Only a 19th century print that gives us a glimpse of its 15 arches. The economic and commercial importance of the city is evidenced by the Macellum, the market, second in size and variety of services only to that in Rome. The Macellum was also known as the Temple of Serapis, after the Greek divinity and patron of markets. In 1750, excavations in the Macellum were ordered by the King of Naples, Charles IV of the Bourbon dynasty. They immediately encountered a small mystery. The columns were pocked up to a certain height with strange and irregular holes. Studies showed that the holes were related to the phenomenon known as bradyseism, the rising and falling of the Phlegrean coast with respect to the sea. The temple was thus at times submerged by the sea, and when it rose again it was marked by these holes made by mollusks known as lithophaga. The Macellum comprised a large rectangular portico, measuring 190 by 245 feet and enclosing the shops. It was an impressive and bustling marketplace. At the center of the internal courtyard, there was a round building, the tholos, decorated with marble sculptures and statues. The market was a riot of Mediterranean colors, a meeting place for many different peoples and languages, from Egyptian and Phoenician to Greek and Latin. On display were exotic products, spices, perfumes, ointments, Greek and Egyptian antiques, and naturally, a wide variety of products from the sea. In 1700, in the large apse behind the tholos, archaeologists found a statue of Serapis, after whom the entire complex was named. Not far from Potswili, in another part of the Phlegrean fields, is the beautiful and unsettling Solfatara, the best-known volcanic crater in the Phlegrean area. The volcano has been dormant for at least 2,000 years, but its characteristic phenomena are still visible today. There are few places where one has the clear impression of the phrase, "fire in the belly of the earth." Tradition has it that giants were chained here after being defeated in a bitter fight with almighty Jupiter. The Phlegrean fields, according to this ancient myth, are unstable because of the agitated, convulsive movements of these giants. Another area related to myths about the underworld is the nearby Lake of Averno. The door to Hades was said to be found on its shores, blanketed in ancient times with a thick forest. According to Virgil, the Sibyl's Cave was also here, where both Aeneas and Ulysses went to begin their journeys into the underworld. The Magna Graecia was a home to people who not only loved literature and art, music and poetry, architecture and drama, but who appreciated the lush landscape, the open seas, and the tantalizing mythology that came with the territory. For gods and goddesses, and sailors and warriors who came home from the sea, Magna Graecia was almost heaven on earth, an enchanting land, combining a nobility that was all Greece on a palette of exceptional beauty.